I was married to Adrian for 50 years. I cared for his parents, managed the household, and raised our children. To anyone who would listen, Adrian sang my praises. But on his deathbed, after sending our children out of the room, his gaze turned cold. No longer gentle as it once was, his eyes brimmed with loathing and bitterness. "Emily," he said, his voice trembling, "the biggest mistake of my life was marrying you. I regret it. I hate it." I froze, unable to comprehend. His words echoed in my ears long after he drew his final breath. It wasn't until I found the answer in the tightly clenched palm of his lifeless hand that I understood. It was a crumpled piece of paper, yellowed with time, containing a promise. Adrian had made a pact with his first love, Elise, a promise of 7 years. If neither of them married anyone else during that time, they would be together. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, I felt nothing but peace. "Adrian," I whispered, "we are finally free of each other." "Emily, why are you home so early today?" I just saw Adrian coming back. He looked absolutely radiant, like something great happened. "Are you two getting married? Planning the wedding already?" I was just about to push open the gate when Clara, busy weeding next door, spotted me. Facing her inquisitive, gossipy expression, I calculated the timing. Adrian's friend had just returned from abroad. "No wedding," I said evenly. "Really? So, are you and Adrian going to get married by the end of the year or not? The whole neighborhood is waiting." In my previous life, we would have been married in just 2 weeks, but now, everything was different. I gripped the marriage registration papers tucked in my pocket. Half an hour ago, I realized I had been reborn. The first thing I did was retrieve the application for our marriage. After placating Clara, I pushed the gate open. Adrian was standing right behind it. We came face to face, catching each other off guard. He wore his crisp work uniform, accentuating his broad shoulders, narrow waist, and long legs. He looked exactly as I remembered. Those deep, confident eyes of his met mine, steady, but laced with a faint coldness. It had taken me a lifetime to understand that faint coldness wasn't just a quirk of his personality, it was a reflection of his dislike for me, buried deep within. "How did you know my friend was coming back from abroad?" Adrian asked, frowning, his gaze probing. "Didn't you tell me?" I replied calmly. In my last life, Adrian's first love, Elise, had also returned today. He had kept it a secret, not telling me until an incident forced him to introduce her. "When did I say that?" he pressed. "I don't remember," I said nonchalantly. "But if you didn't tell me, how else would I know?" Adrian didn't respond, his eyes narrowing as if trying to decipher a spy. Clearing his throat, he said, "Right. I was going to tell you. A friend of mine just came back and doesn't have a place to stay. I was planning to help her find somewhere, so I won't be home for dinner tonight." I had no intention of cooking for him anyway. "Go ahead," I nodded in agreement. Adrian looked at me, surprised at how quickly I consented. I knew exactly what shocked him. Adrian was handsome, a university math professor, and highly sought after by many women. In the past, I had clung to him tightly. Whenever he went out, I would demand to know where, why, and with whom. Over time, Adrian grew irritated, waiting for me to leave the house before sneaking off himself. "Why are you staring? Go ahead. Don't keep your friend waiting," I urged. Adrian hesitated before pulling a small chocolate bar from his pocket. This hadn't happened in my previous life. I glanced at the chocolate in his hand. It wasn't hard to guess, he must have intended it for Elise but, for some reason, was offering it to me now. "I don't eat that. It'll rot my teeth," I declined. I wasn't the naive girl who would fall deeper for him over a small gesture of kindness anymore, and I hadn't forgotten his dying words. "The biggest mistake of my life was marrying you." Seeing my refusal, Adrian tried to explain, "It's chocolate, not candy. I wouldn't know the difference. Why don't you give it to someone who does?" I cut him off impatiently and brushed past him into the house. This time, I'd let him and his precious Elise have each other. Adrian didn't come home that night. I didn't waste time guessing what he and Elise might have been up to. Instead, I spent the entire night drafting a report to apply for a spot in the nurses' dormitory. By early morning, I submitted the application. The result would take a few days. Returning to my duties, I threw myself into work. Time slipped by, and before I knew it, the morning was almost over. Only 2 or 3 patients remained when Adrian burst into the clinic, carrying Elise in his arms. His steps were hurried, and he shoved his way to the front of the line. "Emily, take a look at my friend. Her leg is hurt. Can you stop the bleeding first?" I glanced at him briefly, surprised. Adrian, the paragon of discipline and fairness, was cutting in line. His face was full of urgency. "Why are you looking at me? Check her leg already," he demanded. Following his words, I looked at Elise's exposed calf. A shallow scratch. If they'd come in any later, it might have scabbed over on its own. Go to the back of the line, I said coolly. Adrian froze. What? Raising my voice, I repeated, I said, go to the back of the line. This time, he heard me loud and clear. His brows knitted together, and his tone dropped a few notches. Emily. Ignoring him, I focused on treating my current patient. Adrian didn't expect me to treat him so coldly. He grabbed my arm, and I turned to him sharply. Adrian, you're a teacher. Don't you understand the principle of first come, first served? Or is this how you teach your students at school? He was utterly caught off guard by my response. Sensing the tension, Elise spoke up. Adrian, I'm fine. Let's go to the back and wait our turn. Her words finally moved him. Supporting Elise, Adrian begrudgingly took her to the end of the line. Eventually, it was Elise's turn. I disinfected the scratch on her leg with iodine. All done. Just keep it dry. Adrian looked astonished. That's it? Doesn't it need to be bandaged? No. It's already scabbed over, I said matter-of-factly. Memories of my past life resurfaced. I had once suffered a deep gash in my leg that required heavy bandaging. Adrian had scolded me for being dramatic, dismissing my pain as insignificant. Yet here he was, fussing over Elise's scratch. It doesn't need bandaging. You can handle it yourself. I'm off duty and about to eat. I placed the basket of gauze down in front of him without sparing him a second glance. Then I grabbed my lunchbox and left, ignoring his darkened expression. Days turned into weeks. Adrian continued to bring Elise into my orbit, claiming she had no one else to rely on. He introduced her to everyone as my cousin. I didn't bother correcting him, words didn't matter anymore. Actions spoke louder, and my actions were already paving the way for my departure. The day I received my acceptance into the nurse's dormitory, I packed my belongings and left Adrian's house. On the table near the entrance, I left behind the voided marriage application and the bottle of skincare lotion he had given me. This time, there was no turning back. 5 years passed. I flourished in the northwestern frontier, honing my skills and finding my true calling. My reputation as a skilled nurse grew, and eventually, I was transferred to the Central Hospital, a prestigious institution. Life had finally become my own. One evening, while walking home, I crossed paths with Adrian. Time had not been kind to him. His once confident posture was now hunched, his hair streaked with gray. He looked at me with unspoken regret. Emily, he said, his voice trembling, I was wrong. I shouldn't have said those things to you. I met his gaze steadily. Adrian, we are both where we were meant to be. Let it go. As I walked away, I felt the weight of my past lift completely. My future lay ahead, boundless and bright, full of promise and peace.